New tonight at 11, we're hearing from the family of a woman shot and killed outside of the Spalding County courthouse. And tonight, the daughter of Crystal Evans says her mother did not have to die.
What would you do if you discovered that the person you loved, the one you built your life with, had been living a secret double life? Pause and let that sit for a moment. Really picture it. This isn't a stranger on the internet or a plot from a film. This is Crystal Evans, a woman who woke up one morning and found the ground she'd stood on for 14 years quietly, disastrously shifting beneath her feet. I want you to feel that weight with me. 14 years of shared bills, of birthday candles and school recitals, of small compromises that add up into the life you call yours. Crystal and Tom, from the outside, appeared to be a stable family. Neighbors waved at the mailbox. They attended the same church events. There were pictures of smiling kids, a house that looked lived in, a marriage that, by all appearances, had endured. But appearances are often the thinnest mask of all. As I dig into this story, you'll see how the mask began to crack in the smallest places first. A late-night text erased too quickly, a denial where an explanation should have been, a joke that landed with a little too much bite. Crystal started dropping hints online, small, almost casual posts that read like notes pressed into a diary. She wrote about trust and the slow erosion of it, about sleepless nights and a heart that felt heavier than it should. Friends who read those posts sensed something wrong. Some reached out, others waited for her to speak aloud what she only hinted at. At times, she asked for help in indirect ways, leaving a paper trail because she was afraid of saying the words straight to his face. "I'm terrified for my life and my children's," she wrote on more than one occasion. That sentence, so ordinary and yet so ferocious, was a window into a woman who was both exhausted from fighting and finally starting to act. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here with me today. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city, your state, or even your country in the comments so we can see just how far this community reaches. And while you're here, go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. It really helps push the story out to more people who need to hear it. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another powerful story like this one. I need you to understand the first twist, and it's the one that turns betrayal into something more corrosive. Crystal didn't just discover lies about where he had been or who he had been with, she discovered an entire hidden life. The men who knew Tom as the friendly neighbor and the volunteer at the community center would never have suspected the late nights, the secret accounts, the quiet messages on apps that don't show up on a spouse's phone bill. For Crystal, it was not one isolated betrayal, but a pattern of deception that had been woven through the fabric of their marriage for years. She found receipts that didn't match vacations they'd taken together, names and travel itineraries that meant nothing to her, and eventually a second phone tucked away like contraband. Each discovery was a new wound. Each wound was another reason she began to imagine life apart. And yet, there was still love there. Complicated, stubborn love that made her hesitate. Who among us has not stood at the crossroads of conscience and habit, hoping that someone we love will choose differently? Pause again and imagine the moment of decision. A woman who had given 14 years of her life finally deciding to leave. That alone is a seismic change, but it was the beginning of something far darker. In the months that followed her decision to walk away, the stakes escalated. The man who had kept two faces could not or would not accept the life he'd controlled slipping out of reach. Arguments that had once been private became edged with menace. Calls to police were made. Friends pushed for a restraining order. Crystal tried to create proof, to build a paper trail. Facebook posts saved witnesses who said they'd heard threats. And still, there was disbelief in the system's slow machinery. Court dates scheduled, protective orders processed, but protection is not the same as safety. Here is the second twist. The very institutions meant to bridge the gap between fear and safety, courthouses, deputies, official paperwork, proved inadequate at the moment she needed them most. Have you ever ignored red flags in someone you loved? I'm going to ask you that now because your answer matters. Your reaction is the heartbeat under this story. People will tell you that they saw signs, that there were conversations, that neighbors suspected something. Others will say Crystal never directly asked for help. The truth lives in the messy middle. She did ask, sometimes in ways that were loud and clear, sometimes in whispers on Facebook that only later would be read as a cry for help. And here's the final turn I'll leave you with for now. Although she tried to claim her freedom, and although the divorce papers were being signed, the revelation of Tom's secret life did not dissolve his control. It sharpened it. Follow me closely, because we'll follow how those secrets metastasized into threats, how small humiliations turned into intimidation, and how the thin shield of a protective order could not block the trajectory of a man who had already decided he would not be denied.
My mom literally called the sheriff department the day before because he was stalking her. She even showed them that the PTO that she was granted for life Wednesday from the divorce, and they did nothing. Had they had someone walked out with her, like, her friend asked, she would still be here.
Crystal Evans had discovered the truth. The man she had loved, the one she had shared 14 years of marriage with, was living a double life. His secrets weren't the kind that could be brushed aside or explained away with weak apologies. They were deliberate, layered, and devastating. Affairs with other women were painful enough, but the deeper she looked, the more she realized Tom's betrayals crossed lines she never imagined her husband would cross. He had hidden entire relationships with men, kept carefully tucked away, as though he believed he could play two lives at once. For Crystal, it wasn't just the betrayal of intimacy, it was the betrayal of honesty, of trust, of the sacred foundation that held a marriage together. But here's the part that might make you pause. Crystal didn't leave right away. She knew the truth, and she still stayed. And that choice, for many, is hard to understand. Yet when you peel back the layers of love and fear, it becomes more human than you might think. People stay in relationships that hurt them all the time, not because they are blind, not because they are weak, but because leaving is often harder than enduring. Think about it. 14 years together, children, bills, a house, memories that don't vanish just because you've discovered a lie. There is love, yes, but also denial. There's fear of starting over, fear of retaliation, fear of what it might mean to truly be alone. Crystal's Facebook posts during this time read like quiet screams. She never came out with a full confession of what she was living through, but her words dripped with exhaustion, with betrayal, with fear that she couldn't put in plain text. "You don't always know the person you share your bed with," she wrote once. Another time, she hinted at lies and manipulation, couching them in vague language as if testing whether anyone would read between the lines. If you look closely now, you can almost hear her silence. The things she didn't write speak louder than the ones she did. What Crystal didn't know was that betrayal wasn't the only danger inside her marriage. Secrets can wound the heart, but control can wound the spirit. Tom was more than a man who strayed. He was a man who demanded control. Friends noticed how his temper flared at the smallest things. A delayed dinner, a missed call, a conversation with a male colleague. Any of these could ignite anger. He grew jealous easily, and his anger often escalated past words. The signs were there, early and often, but like so many people who live in toxic marriages, Crystal minimized them, hoping they were temporary storms that would pass. This is where I need to bring you in. If you found out your partner was living a double life, would you walk away immediately, cutting ties no matter the cost? Or would you try to hold the family together, convincing yourself that maybe, somehow, things could be fixed? Be honest with yourself, because this is the line Crystal stood on for years, her heart and her safety on one side, her family and her fear of change on the other. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Behind closed doors, Tom's grip tightened. When he felt her pulling away, he would pull harder. When she tried to create space, he filled it with arguments, accusations, and guilt. And all the while, she tried to keep a semblance of normalcy, smiling at church, attending family functions, taking photos with the kids. To the outside world, they were still a couple who had built a life together. But inside that home, Crystal was learning a truth many victims of toxic love eventually face. Sometimes the danger isn't only in being left, it's in staying. And yet the tragedy is this. Crystal thought she still had time. She believed she could take careful steps, document her fears, quietly gather proof, and then walk away safely. But the truth was far darker, because betrayal may break a heart, but Tom Mallory's need for control was about to endanger her life.
The unraveling of a 14-year marriage is never clean. But in Crystal's case, it was brutal. When she finally filed for divorce, it wasn't just the paperwork that marked the end of their marriage. It was the emotional severing of the life she and Tom had built. For Crystal, those papers represented freedom. For Tom, they represented humiliation. And humiliation, in the mind of a man desperate for control, is often gasoline poured over dry wood. Tom spiraled. Friends of Crystal recall how his mood swung from pleading and manipulative apologies to explosive rage that left her shaken. He told her he couldn't live without her, then, in the next breath, threatened that she would regret ever leaving him. He tried to twist the narrative, painting himself as the victim, telling anyone who would listen that Crystal was unstable, that she was the problem. But his facade was crumbling. The truth that she had endured betrayal, secrecy, and manipulation was too heavy to bury. And the escalation was swift. Crystal sought protection, going to court for restraining orders. She called the police multiple times when Tom appeared at her home, lurking in his car outside, shadowing her movements. Each time she hoped the system would protect her, that someone in authority would see the danger in his behavior. But the response was common. Paperwork filed, warnings issued, but little concrete action taken. Deputies came and went, reports were logged, and yet Crystal still felt the gnawing terror that none of it would be enough. And here's where the twist tightens the knot. Crystal wasn't silent. She told people, friends, family, even on her own Facebook, that Tom had threatened her life. In one moment, she looked a friend in the eye and said, "If something happens to me, it's him." Imagine hearing those words from someone you love. Imagine how heavy they must have felt in that moment. She wasn't being dramatic. She was documenting her fear. She was leaving a trail because she knew the danger was real. Pause now, because what came next was inevitable. And she was right. You see, this isn't just a story of a marriage gone wrong. This is where the lens shifts from betrayal to failure. Not Crystal's failure, not even her family's, but the system's. The protective order she was granted should have been a shield, but it was paper thin. The calls to police should have been red alerts, but they were treated as routine. And the courthouse itself, the very building meant to deliver justice, would become the scene of her murder. This is the painful reality. The system too often reacts only after tragedy. Domestic violence warnings are dismissed as he said, she said. Threats are minimized because there's no hard proof. Restraining orders are written as though abusers honor boundaries. And women like Crystal, are left holding a document that promises safety, but delivers nothing. So now I want to turn this to you. Do you think the system does enough to protect women once they decide to leave? Or are the cracks so wide that women like Crystal slip through again and again, even after they've done everything right? Documented threats, gone to court, begged for protection. Because Crystal's story forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the most dangerous moment in a toxic relationship is not when you stay, but when you try to leave. And in Crystal's case, that moment, the moment she thought she was free, would be the one that cost her life.
The morning of Crystal Evans' final day began like so many others. She had walked into that courthouse carrying more than paperwork. She carried hope. Hope that this chapter of her life, as painful as it had been, was finally closing. Just 2 days earlier, her divorce had been finalized. She had secured a permanent protective order against Tom Mallory. To her, this wasn't just a court victory, it was freedom. It was the first page of a new beginning. She left the courthouse that day with her head high, her steps lighter than they had been in years. Friends say she was even making plans for a small celebration, a party to mark her freedom. Her daughter, Precious, remembered her mother's voice filled with relief. After 14 long years, Crystal finally felt free, but freedom for her was cruelly short-lived. As Crystal sat in her vehicle outside the Spalding County Courthouse, Tom Mallory was waiting. He wasn't inside the building facing justice. He wasn't respecting the order to stay away. He was there with a gun, circling his ex-wife like prey. Witnesses would later recall the sudden eruption of gunfire. In a matter of seconds, the man she had spent half her life with turned his threats into reality. The shots rang out, tearing through the courthouse parking lot. Neighbors nearby heard the sharp cracks echoing across the asphalt. Crystal's body slumped inside her car, her life ending where it should have been beginning again. And just like that, a 14-year marriage ended in murder. The aftermath unfolded in chaos. Sirens screamed as deputies and paramedics rushed to the scene. The same deputies accused of ignoring her pleas now pulled her from the car, desperately trying to stop the bleeding, fighting to save a life they had not protected. Neighbors stood frozen in shock. Passers-by covered their mouths, some crying, others unable to comprehend how something so violent could erupt outside the very courthouse meant to provide safety and order. For Crystal's family, the devastation was instant and irreparable. Her daughter Precious would later say she had begged the sheriff's department for help. A friend had even asked the clerk to arrange an escort for Crystal as she left court that day. But no escort came. No deputy walked her to her car. She was left alone. And Tom knew it. But here's what makes this even harder to accept. This didn't have to happen. There were missed opportunities, moments when the system could have intervened and didn't. The protective orders should have meant something more than ink on paper. The repeated calls about stalking should have raised alarms louder than they did. Deputies should have seen the pattern of escalating behavior. The courthouse itself should have been her sanctuary, not the place where she met her end. Instead, the warnings went unheeded. The paper trail she left behind, her Facebook posts, her calls to the sheriff's office, her pleas to friends, became evidence only after it was too late. What was once a love story turned betrayal was now a cautionary tale,
of how fragile protection can be when systems fail. And in those final moments, as Crystal's life slipped away, the silence she had been forced to carry for so long was shattered by gunfire. A silence that could have been broken sooner if only someone had truly listened.
When I sat down to watch Tom face justice, it didn't feel real at first. 14 years of marriage, 4 children, countless memories. And now, the man Crystal once trusted most sat in an orange jumpsuit, chains around his wrists, eyes darting across the courtroom like a cornered animal. I couldn't help but think, how did it come to this? As the trial unfolded, the truth came out piece by piece. The prosecution describes Tom's rage, his manipulation, and his threats. Then came the testimonies. Friends shared how Crystal had confided in them, whispering fears she never posted online. Police officers admitted she had called for help more than once, only to be told to document it and stay safe. Her parents spoke through tears, describing the daughter they raised, how she was vibrant, full of life, and how she only wanted to be loved. And then a moment that shook me to my core. A recording was played, Crystal's own voice, shaky, tired. She told a friend, "If something happens to me, it's him." Those words hung in the air like a shadow. I felt my chest tighten because she knew. She tried to protect herself. She begged for someone to take her seriously, and no one did. The jury didn't take long. The word guilty rang out, and for a split second, the courtroom was silent. Then came the tears. Some cried in relief, others in pure grief. Tom sat motionless, almost cold, as though the life he destroyed was just another passing moment. I wanted to believe justice had been served, but taking a look at Crystal's family, I realized there's no such thing as justice when the person you love is gone forever. Outside the courthouse, the crowd gathered with candles in their hands. Strangers stood shoulder to shoulder, chanting Crystal's name, demanding change. People weren't just mourning her, they were angry at a system that had failed her. And I kept thinking, how many more women are out there right now whispering the same words Crystal did? If something happens to me, it's him. But I don't want you to remember Crystal only for how she died. She was more than the headlines. She loved cooking big family meals. She laughed the loudest when surrounded by friends. She worked hard to give her kids a better future. And even when her marriage crumbled, she clung to hope that somehow things would get better. That's the Crystal I want you to see. Still, the questions linger. Why wasn't more done? Why weren't the warning signs enough? Why did it take her death for people to listen? These are the questions that haunt me, and maybe they haunt you too. So let me ask you, and I want you to really think about this. Do you believe this tragedy was fueled more by betrayal or by a system that turned its back on Crystal when she needed it most? If this story has moved you even a little, hit the like button right now so more people will hear Crystal's voice through us. Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and your words matter. And if you haven't yet, subscribe and join me, because together we are more than just viewers of these stories. We are the ones who keep their memories alive. We are the ones who demand that their stories are never forgotten. Thank you for watching, and see you in my next video.